Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Great topic today. Let's go for it. All right, Reddit, what is your spookiest or most unexplainable event that has happened to you? Serious. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 7, my family made a quick road trip to visit my grandma who was in hospice. We got back home late at night, and my sister and I saw our grandma sitting in the rocking chair in our home, the rocking chair that had belonged to her husband. Our mom walked in and told us that grandma had died and we were going to have to drive back in the morning. My sister and I didn't mention it for years, but we both are absolutely certain grandma stopped by to say goodbye. I was at a friend's farm, walking down the road talking to the owner. I told her of a story my brother told me of seeing a large flash when he was there last. We laughed a little, and then there was a huge flash that lit up the whole valley. I saw it as a tunnel. There were 5 of us there that saw it. Yeah, it was a bit odd. Had visitors, and their kids liked my room because it had a massive bed that they could play. We thought they were there because they were noisy. One of the mothers was about to tell them to be quiet when all the kids came inside from the backyard asking for snacks. The noise from my bedroom was gone, and we asked the kids if they'd been in my room. They said no, because they were told not to by someone. They didn't elaborate on who that someone was. Phantom whistling that followed a tune that me, my brother, and my sister were singing. Greensleeves, very random LOL. While doing dishes in the kitchen one summer. The whistle continued the tune for about 5 seconds after we finished singing, and it just dissipated. My sister and I can't whistle, and we were all staring at each other while the whistling occurred. My brother and sister immediately checked outside for a passerby. We live in the country, no neighbors, and if there was someone there, they would have seen them for sure. Not to mention, the whistle was right in the kitchen with us. While I covered my ears and started having a panic attack from fear, LOL. They checked inside the house for someone too. We couldn't explain it and still talk about it to this day. My parents still live there and continue to have odd experiences, but nothing to that level. I was about 11 and at my mate's pop's farm for my friend's birthday. A weekend full of tree forts, truth or dare, and shooting guns. It was sick. At night, me and my friends decided to play hardcore spotlight around the entire farm. This is about 9 acres, by the way. My friend, who we'll call Gus, was picked to be the spotter. This meant he had a torch and had to try and find us in the pitch black bush. He counted to 100 seconds, while me and my friends, who we will call Lee and Tom, decided to hide in the small dump truck at the far end of the farm. 40 minutes go by, and no sign of any torch or Gus. We were bored as F, so we decided to start beeping the horn and singing songs as well as flashing the light so that he could find us. 15 minutes go by, no Gus. We start to go back to the house because we think something might be wrong. We see a light on outside and Gus is sitting there with tears everywhere. His shirt is wet from them. We think he hurt himself, but he had no marks whatsoever. He's just pale as F and panting. We asked what was wrong, and he said he saw a bunyip. A bunyip, by the way, is an Australian bush legend of a creature that lives in swamps and eats people. We laughed our asses off first, thinking he was bullshitting, and went back to the RV we were sleeping in. When I was laying there, I realized that it would be very difficult to pretend to cry so hard and be so pale as Gus, and Gus wasn't good at acting. Well, let's see. Late at night, young child alone on a huge area of land with a flashlight looking for friends. Could it have been a mythological creature that he saw that upset him? Sure. Could it have been a child's overactive imagination and a little bit of fear playing with him? Sure. What do you think? Saw an old lady walking in front of me. I walked past her. She smiles at me. I thought she might know me. I smiled back. After maybe 10 seconds, I looked back and she vanished. It was broad daylight and not a very busy road. It goes straight with one turn, and which is clearly visible too. It was 10 seconds. No normal person can vanish like that. It was really spooky. I once saw a homeless man walking toe-to-toe on the curb on a busy street. He heard a truck coming and bolted right in front of it. I saw the truck slam its brakes to avoid hitting the guy, but it wasn't possible because the truck was speeding. I looked away briefly because I didn't want to see the guy on the pavement and grabbed my phone to call 911. The guy wasn't on the pavement. He also wasn't on the other side of the street. He was gone. This happened to me in the past month. For background, I work in a retirement home doing activities. On this day, I was filling in at the healthcare center, which is basically hospice. I was in the day room reading stories with one of the ladies. She suddenly asked me who that woman was, while to me, looked like she was pointing across the room. I don't know, but I'd be happy to ask her so we can find out. I thought she was talking about one of the CNAs who was sitting across the room. No, the woman right next to you, on your left. There was no one sitting next to me. She continued. She looks just like you, but her hair is longer. She says she doesn't have a name, but she's very nice. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end, and I must have been giving her a look. Did I say something wrong? No, nothing's wrong. I made a quick excuse to leave and practically ran back to my memory care unit. Now here's what shook me up. I was supposed to be an identical twin, but my twin died while we were still in the womb, leaving only me. This is not information I share with people I work with. One of the CNAs knew from looking at me that something had happened and wanted to know what it was. She was equally horrified when I told her the story. I had what I called a black hole dream series. In the dreams, I was always in control, but as soon as I mentioned it or even thought it, I'd be snapped into a different reality or place. For example, the most recent one I remember in the dream, I woke up in a forest and wandered around singing something, but I couldn't remember what I was singing. Then I stopped and said, "Where am I going? I shouldn't be here." Then I snapped into my bedroom that I was currently sleeping in, sat up, then a pair of hands pushed me down by my chest, and then I woke up. It's really creepy and odd. My father was diagnosed with terminal cancer May 2018. He was given a couple of months to live. My sister was his primary caregiver. I would share some of the responsibility by going over occasionally to help with all sorts of daily routines. My sister was asked to be part of a wedding party. Her best friend since grad school was getting married. She had called to ask for me to make sure my schedule was clear so that she would be able to attend a bridal shower. So I opened up my calendar and marked the date and time. This would have been early June 2018, scheduling for late July 2018. A few weeks after the conversation, my father inevitably had succumbed to his diagnosis and died July 4th, 2018 in the afternoon. The following few weeks were non-stop, with arrangements and legal matters, etc. I was the executor, so I was very busy every day after his passing. One morning I was feeling overwhelmed and needed some time to myself. I had asked my husband to take our daughter out for the day so I could just reflect and nap. I fell asleep on the sofa. I had been sleeping for a while when I woke to hearing my father's voice. "Wake up, Dolly," what he called me growing up. It sounded as if he was standing right over me. It sent shivers down my spine. I sat up and had this overwhelming urge to grab my phone. When I opened it, my calendar was open, which it wasn't beforehand, and it was the same day and time where I had scheduled for my sister's outing a month beforehand, hang with Dad. It always made me question a lot of things, but ultimately I was grateful to have been able to hang with him after all, even with his creepy reminder. When I was in college, I was walking across campus to my early morning class when this old white man with the bluest eyes I've ever seen stopped me to ask for bus ticket money. Everything went still around us, no sounds, the air felt stiff, and there was literally no one but us outside. The man's eyes were like aquamarine, but the rest of his face, it was like his skin was plastered on. His nose looked stuck on like clay. His cheeks looked like they were barely hanging on to whatever was underneath. He looked truly bizarre. He stops me and compliments my lipstick and asks if I could help him pay for a bus ticket so he could visit his son. I told him I didn't have cash to help him. He never breaks eye contact and tells me he's a veteran and takes his wallet out to show me his military lapel. When he opens it, I see a wad of cash in there, and he looks at me again and asks if I could help. While all of this was happening, the only thing I felt was that I was in danger. I truly thought I was in the presence of someone evil, even though he didn't say or do anything to provoke the feeling. I ended up reaching in my bag for quarters and gave them to him. He held my hand for what felt like forever and let me go on my merry way. I think about this encounter a lot because it felt like he was pretending to be human. His skin looked like it was made out of wet clay and wrongly placed. His eyes were so blue they looked unnatural. And why ask for money when you had it already? That description sounds pretty terrifying, so you were right to be scared? I don't know what to say. Could it have been just some old man that maybe had some level of dementia? Or could it have been a night walker? I used to work at a bowling alley arcade laser tag place. Apparently someone had died there in the laser tag arena just under a year before I started working there. One night we closed the arena for a few hours and I had to clean the arena with some of other employees. While we were cleaning, both the main lights and the decorative black lights went out and the whole room was pitch dark. I was on the upper level of the arena when one of the guys behind me screamed at the top of his lungs. I saw that he was somehow barely dangling above the safety rail and yanked his arm back before he fell. He was really freaked out and said that something cold touched his back and pushed him. There have been other occasions where he's been injured or attacked by some unseen force while inside the arena, and we all thought it was the ghost of the guy who died. The employee later quit because he was almost seriously injured inside that cursed arena. When I was 10, I was going through a lot of terrible stuff and was processing trauma, so who knows if this was a hallucination or a trauma response to what was happening or something like that, but whatever. It messed me up. I was in my room after something really bad happened and I was crying really hard into my blanket when this weird pounding sound started on my roof. I had a second attic since I slept upstairs and you could easily access it. There were also windows into my room in my old house, so I could look out and see the street. It was kind of a light tapping. It was repetitive and was enough to get me up, and I refused to open my door. I honestly was scared to look in the hallway. I checked out the window and saw nothing, but still heard the tapping, and it was slowly almost building. It was horrifying. Something started banging on the door, and I fell asleep crying. I went to my mom that morning and asked if she heard anything that night. I still wonder what happened. This happened about 12 years ago. I lived on the first floor of a 2-story building, which had all kinds of weird, ghosty crap going on. My crazy landlord had bought heaps of random crap at estate sales and such and was hoarding it in the basement, which I never went in because it gave me the effing creeps. I think all the dead people's junk is why the place was haunted as F, but this is my best story. I lived here alone for a year before my boyfriend moved in. We had no pets and no kids. I told him a few stories and he was skeptical at best. We shared a king bed, but had separate covers. I had recurring nightmares about a boy maybe 2 years old, blonde bowl-cut hair, denim overalls but no shirt under and no shoes on him. He would stand on my side of the bed and stare at me, watching me sleep. I'd wake up in a panic and he would vanish. One night I fell asleep with my feet out of the covers. Boyfriend was sleeping next to me. I feel a very gentle pressure on my left big toe, right where it joins the rest of my foot. I was awake but absolutely freaked out. It lasted a few minutes and stopped. Eventually I fell back asleep. Over the next month, this happened a few more times, on different feet here and there. I didn't tell my boyfriend, worried he might laugh at me or think I was crazy. Next time it happened, it went on for a good 15 minutes, and I never had the nerve to look down and see what the F was holding my foot. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Hey, please let go of my toe," and slowly the pressure left and I went back to sleep. I sucked up the courage and told my boyfriend the next day. He didn't laugh or call me crazy. He shrugged and said, "Okay, I know about your nightmares and something is going on. Next time it happens, wake me up and I'll look down for you." Okay, great. So a week or two went by with no foot touching. I hoped it was over. Nope. I felt it again. I tapped my boyfriend and he opened his eyes. He was awake. I said, "Boo, he's got my foot. Look down for me." Boyfriend nodded but didn't look down. He just stared at me and whispered back, "I feel him too, and I'm not looking either." From then on, he believed me when crazy shit happened in the apartment. By the way, we've been married 10 years now. My brother was arrested one night after drunk driving. We figured he was kept in jail overnight since it was his third offense. We found out in the morning he had been released that same night. Well, he went missing. We started searching for him the next morning and afternoon. I was the passenger in a vehicle, and suddenly my whole entire body went numb. Couldn't move, speak, etc. for about 2 full minutes. When I was finally able to talk again, I told the person I was driving with I wanted to go back home. 5 minutes after getting home, my brother and the cop he had been out with came back and told us my brother's body had been found. He had committed suicide. My body and brain just knew. My brother had also had a dream that night that our brother came up behind him, gave him a hug and said, "It's going to be okay." Lots, but here's the most inexplicable. Sometime back in the early 90s, my then girlfriend and I lived in a Victorian terraced house. Nothing overtly spooky ever occurred there, apart from the neighbors complaining that someone had been in their house and moved things around when they were away. They were alarmed enough to call the police, and seeing as there was a shared roof space along the terrace, we were briefly questioned, as were the other neighbors. Weirdly, the police asked if there had been any paranormal activity in either of our houses, which we obviously laughed off at the time. A few months later, my girlfriend and I were lying in bed with the lights out. I was on my back with my eyes open. Slowly, a luminescent hollow ball faded into view, seemingly made up of lots of very small dim fluorescent rods, like the magnified pictures of bacteria you see. The ball was about a meter across and was perhaps 1.5 meters above the bed. I was obviously having some pre-sleep hallucination. After a few seconds it faded, and I turned to my girlfriend and I said, "I just saw a ball of small light floating over the bed." She had seen it too. We lay there, shocked. Soon, another hollow ball appeared, this time made up of dim fluorescent triangles. Again, this lasted a few seconds, then faded away. I think after that, eyes were tightly shut and heads went under the duvet, but the experience was never repeated as far as either of us saw. I told this story to somebody once, and they wondered what would have happened if we reached up to that strange object. Anyway, that's one of my stories. So if you're lying in bed in the middle of the night and all of a sudden a little ball of light comes into view, inexplicably floating over your bed, would you touch it? And if you did, what do you think would happen? Growing up, I would travel across the country to spend time with my grandma in the Pacific Northwest. Towards the end of her life, my uncle and his family pushed to have her declared incompetent, thinking that they could control her finances. She was a wealthy woman. I don't know exactly how long it went on, but I know strange things started happening to her. For example, she would have a doctor's appointment, and a male would call and cancel it. She'd show up. The doctor's office would be like, "What the F?" She would wake up to every drawer in her house open, and everything in them dumped onto the floor. Strange shit like that. We thought it was our uncle trying to make her look incompetent. My uncle died in a car accident, but the strange stuff continued. We thought it might be my cousin. My grandmother died while traveling abroad. My mother inherited her house. The strange occurrences continued. My mother would travel back and forth every few weeks, and she'd do stuff like wash all her bedding and blankets before leaving town. She'd come back a couple of weeks later to discover them with seemingly human throw-up all over them. She had some painters working in the house, and they ate lunch outside at their vehicles in the driveway. When they came back in, they found the stove's burners in the kitchen aflame. We thought it might be my cousin, who expected to inherit the house, trying to burn the place down. One day, my mother flew back to the town I grew up in, and that next day, her accountant called her very worried. The news was saying a woman around her age was found murdered on her street. Probate was still pending, and he was worried my cousin might have tried to have her killed. It turned out that it was the woman next door. Someone had beaten her, piled clothes on her, and set her aflame. She liked her alcohol and cigarettes, so they had staged it to look like she was drinking in bed and smoking and accidentally started a fire. They probably would have thought it was an accident, except someone was driving by and saw the smoke. When they went around back, they found that the glass in the door had been cut. She had also stopped smoking about 6 months before her murder. My mother started to feel uneasy about going back, so I offered to accompany her. We arrive. I walk around the house assessing security. The first thing I notice is that a side fence between the house has been broken, like someone tried to climb over it but weighed too much for how it was secured. Beyond the fence is a patio with 3 doors. I go up to the patio and I notice prying marks on one of the doors leading into the garage. My mother had a tenant on the property, so the garage was common space and the rest of the house was secured from it. I go into the garage and I notice a way into an unfinished attic. I start walking around the house, discovering another way into the attic from within the house. I start to become concerned. I go around to all the doors in the house, discovering that someone had jammed paper towels into the locking mechanisms to prevent doors on various balconies from locking. You could just push them open from the outside. The murderer has never been caught. Someone tried to burn the crime scene down again. Some years later, word in the neighborhood is that a handyman discovered the murder weapon on the property, covered in dried blood. I won't go into detail here about it because it's still an active murder investigation.